Hey, what's up guys? How you doing? Another day in the shop, working again on the 89 Coyote swap on the Ranger. Today is kind of a mixed bag of stuff, just kind of while we're waiting for parts. Biggest thing is waiting for suspension so we can mount the engine. Actually got the engine sitting in here. Got the engine and transmission actually bolted up, and it's basically in the spot that it's going to be sitting. Once we do get that in, unless that cross member really changes underneath and I can't let it sit there, but basically that's, I think, where it's going to be sitting. So ultimately we'll have to make it fit. So basically just trying to get as much as I can mocked up and figured out while it's sitting here and while we're waiting. So a little of everything, you know. I do have the wiring harness mounted on the engine harness, and for the most part it's going to fit fine. This is that control pack that I got from Power by the Hour, and you know, this is going to be kind of wired over here for the ECM. We're gonna have to try and figure out how to make this work somehow. That'll be probably a different video, I think, some of that wiring. I'll probably end up taking this factory fuse panel out or moving it to the side a little bit. Also, I don't think we're going to need the starter solenoid because that's going to be mounted on the starter, so it'll be wired up a little bit differently. But I think we'll be able to make the ECM fit over here. You know, they don't give you a whole lot of room, I guess, or length with this. I thought maybe I'd end up mounting it here, but I think that's going to be a little short, so it'll probably be mounted right about here, whether we lay it flat or up. But I think we'll end up maybe having to redo this connector a little bit, and so we can flip it, you know, one way or the other. And we'll also have the chassis harness or body harness that'll come off that too and get wired up also. But for the most part, yeah, wiring is going to be fairly simple with that. It all fits pretty good. I will have to kind of cut this open a little bit here just because it's a little bit tight, so I want to run the wires more over this side than I think from the factory it wants you to run it down this valve cover and down, but I want to try and keep it away from the headers here as much as possible down in this area. So we'll see if we can't go up over the top and down. The intake gets somewhat close in this corner, but we can show you that at a later time. But yeah, just trying to get some of this mocked up. You can see, let me grab a flashlight here. Trying to do some mocking up too of, oops, there we go, a little bit more light, of how the headers are going to fit here. Come on. Okay, my flashlight's not working, but yeah, I got starter kind of barely mounted in here. Trying to see what kind of room I'm going to have for headers and how we're going to route that. Same with on this side. I'll grab my other flashlight here. Might be better. Here, a little more room. This side might be the toughest. I don't know. We'll see. You can kind of see I got that tape on the firewall there. I think that's where I'm going to come through with my steering column. I'm hoping just to tip it down just a little bit right there. And, you know, I don't know at what point I'm going to, you know, where I'm going to cut that off at. That's going to be determined by kind of what angle, you know, when the steering rack is down here, if that shaft that comes off the power steering rack, if that's more vertical, which I'd kind of like it to be. I'd like to come up to here and then follow the frame and then kind of go up over here and then down, you know. But if it's laid back, more horizontal, I don't know if that's going to interfere with my headers here or how that's going to work. So we'll see where I end up cutting that off. If I cut it off real short and then angle it straight down, or, you know, come as close to the frame as I can and then over. So I think I'm going to ultimately go with a 3/4 double D shaft that's going to come out of there. I'll have to kind of modify it, and I'll show you that later as far as how I'm going to do that with the steering column, existing column inside. But I think it'll work. It's just a matter of kind of making it all fit down in here. I did go ahead and got the fuel regulator mounted up in this corner. I got lines hooked up down here. I got the return, and this is the supply here. You know, on the old small block, they kind of came up on the passenger side and came up to this corner of the intake, like most of them do. Just happened to be enough length that all I had to do was just cut them a little bit shorter here and mount everything right there. I got room to, you know, to be able to adjust this, and got the gauge on there. Once the engine is mounted, all I have to do is run a line from this side, you know, kind of along underneath here, underneath the wiper motor, to the back of the intake. Show you that, I guess, but they do make a fitting that'll slide right on here, on fit like factory, but it's an AN fitting on this side. I have that already. It's just a matter of kind of making that line up once we get that intake mounted. I did have the intake sitting on here, and everything clears. We've got plenty of hood clearance and whatnot, and I'm not too worried about that. So having everything fitting in here good. What I'm kind of currently working on, or will be today, is mounting the shifter cable, or getting that kind of cut through here. You can see I just have this basically sitting in here right now. I think originally I had said I was going with a cable that came off of an F-150. I think I went ahead and ordered one out of a Mustang. Both of them are 2016 cables. What did I do with the other one? Let's see. So this would be the F-150 cable right here. It's a little bit longer than the Mustang one. That's what I'm looking for. It probably was in the truck and I missed it. No, I think it's underneath actually. Well, we'll show you that real quick here. I've been trying to mock up where that hole is going to be underneath. Let's see if we sneak in here. Yeah, there it is. So you can kind of see how it's going to be routed here. You know, that'll be mounted like that. It'll be just kind of below those two mounting holes right there. And it kind of angles right from that little tab right there. But let me pull this out here once. The F-150 cable will work. It's just that there's a little bit too much excess there that you have to try and loop up right above, you know, kind of in this area on the back of the intake. I think there'd be way too much of a loop to try and bend and tweak. I don't know if that's going to, you know, give you shifting problems later or not, but I'll straighten these as best I can, I guess. But you can see there's decent amount of length there that they change. This one here actually did come with the little mounting tabs, which are kind of nice, which I'll probably use at least one of them. This goes on this end. Let me grab the actual shifter too. Do this out of the vehicle. But so that because of the way you know, on the Mustang, everything, the shifter and just the cab itself is so much lower in the vehicle and closer together. That's why this cable is going to be shorter than the F-150, which is, you know, a little bit longer. I do like that it came with, the F-150 came with the cable, or the rubber grommet, which I'm probably going to end up cutting off and using it for this one. But This one, it's decently or nice and short, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to use that one. But on the Mustang, the shifter is different. You know, the F-150 being it sits up higher in the center console, the cable actually angles down, where on the Mustang, the cable actually comes underneath the shifter. If you ever look up the two differences, you'll see. So it mounts a little bit differently, and that's, you know, these here mount a little different too. So this is actually supposed to kind of, you know, slide in here, and then it gets bolted on with that there. But I had made this little bracket originally to use this. I'm still going to use that bracket with the Mustang cable. So it'll actually, and don't give me too much crap about my engineering here, but basically it's just I'm gonna take a couple zip ties and zip tie that thing tight right on there, and it shouldn't move, and I'll have enough play in it. I guess you could use, you know, the Mustang shifter itself if you want to. It's a little different design. The one thing I noticed between the two of them is that on the F-150 you're going to have, you know, you have 1, 2, I think it's drive, overdrive, or sorry, 1, 2, drive, manual, selector, then you have overdrive, then you have neutral, reverse, park. So you have 7 of them, where the Mustang only has, let's see, park, reverse, neutral, drive, or I should say overdrive, drive. Then it has an S, I believe. I don't know if that's selector or not, but I basically wanted to be able to use all those, you know, capabilities, be able to adjust, you know, up or down which gear I want to stay in, which I think you can with the Mustang. I'm not 100% sure, but so that's why I ended up going with this shifter, I guess, and just want to use all those capabilities. And you know, this cable for the Mustang, being it doesn't have 1 and 2 in the Mustang, there is a slightly less bit of travel, I guess, on this cable, or it seems to be, but there's still plenty there enough to work on this one. So that's kind of why my engineering there is a little bit goofy. But along with that cable, I also did buy the bracket that is for the Mustang for a 6R80 transmission that actually mounts right on the transmission there. This bracket does not work on this, or won't fit in the Ranger here. So you can see I have it cut apart here. This is how it's supposed to look, you know, basically together. This piece here is kind of angled that way. You know, this fits on this adapter here, this little clip here, but it sticks out and hits the firewall, so that's why it doesn't fit. So I end up having to turn this upside down basically in there, and it actually, when you bolt it up, or at least I'd be using this bolt here, it's in the right position as far as where this needs to be, you know, front to back, up or down, but it's got to be kind of angled a little bit. I do not need this piece anymore, so I had to cut that off. It's basically going to look like this when I'm done. This has to be angled just a little bit up, and I'm sure when I'm all done here I'll show you, but this will come up a little bit, nothing too drastic, and then I'll just kind of fill this in, or, you know, I think right here it's pretty close to my transmission cooler line, so I can't fill this in, but we'll put a little piece in here and weld it all nice and together, and then we'll try it. If for some reason this just doesn't work, I still might end up using this part of it and the clips and go back to the F-150 cable. So we'll see how this works, but I think I'll be able to get this to work no problem, and it'll be adjusted correctly. It's just a matter of a little bit of welding here and making a little bracket there. So I do have a little bit more room than I thought on the bottom side here, where the tranny cooler lines come out. You can see I just got it tacked on there. It's probably would have been easier just to save this part of the bracket and just disregard the rest of it. What I think I might do is just put a little support in here. I think I want to, you know, one bolt probably would be enough, but I don't want that to twist or move, I guess, so I'm probably going to try and brace it to this other bolt hole here. And I don't know if I'll fill in that top two again if I'm going to put support underneath here, but we'll make it look nice, get it to fit in here. Like I said, it's going to hit, you know, too far up one way, you'll hit the firewall or the floor here. And that all depends on how if you cut the floor out, how much you cut out or how you do that. So, but there is room. I'll just have to. There's room now, you know, gap there, but I'll probably flatten that a little bit on that corner just to make sure, in case you get things that move around a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think this will work fine. Got the right angle that I'm looking for to come down and hook up to here. So now it's just a matter of kind of taking this off and making this a full bracket here and make it look nice. So make a little template here to go to this other bolt hole and get her all welded up. So I decided to forego my other plan of using that part of the bracket. I just cut all that off and made a new one. So now I have both bolt holes that I can use. It's quite a bit bigger now. Just a matter of kind of grinding that weld down and give it some paint, and we should be good to go. I got the angle right, you know, kind of put a bend right there as you kind of see. So should work perfect. Already kind of test fitted it. Should be good to go. All right, so I decided to make a little bracket for basically to mount it on the shifter on the inside. Basically this is going to go, this just slides in there. I'll show you here in a second why. That just slides together and then it'll bolt on. But kind of show you. So this will snap onto there. And the way I had it before, my zip tie trick wasn't going to work. So it just flexes too much. So it doesn't really shift real well. So I decided to use this clip here. I kind of swung it down so it bolts on there. I had to cut a little groove in there, and then I just had to kind of strengthen it because otherwise that plastic would flex. So this is going on the back side, and then it'll bolt together. And I actually had to make a second groove on the back side there just so that plate can clear. But once that's bolted together, I'll still put a zip tie over the top of this, and then it'll be nice and sturdy and it should shift fine. I also had to so I have the hole cut here. That's where the, you know, the grommet is going to go. It's a fairly large hole there, and that's just the way it is. I mean, this part of the cable's big anyway, so you kind of have to have a big hole to cut to get it through. You don't necessarily have to have a grommet like I do there, or like the one I'm robbing off that other cable, but somehow you're going to have to get it through there, a decent sized hole. So I cut it there. It's actually just, this is a brace here for the dash, and there's a little bracket that's welded here. Right here that goes all the way up and down, there's a pinch weld on the outside that goes across the tunnel here. I'm just below it and barely just to the left of center of tunnel is where that hole is cut, and it came out okay. So this will kind of be down just a little bit like that. Once everything's bolted down, you know, that'll be mounted solid. And then I'll kind of show you here real quick what it looks like underneath. That bracket installed down here. Oops, let's go this way. So you can see I got room between that bracket and the tunnel there. So it's connected there. You got clearance over the top of the tranny cooler lines. I don't know if you can see it, both bolts are installed there, so try and get a shot from me on top here. This flashlight's too bright, reflects everything. I don't know if you can kind of see back in there or not. See if I get some light down in there. But you can kind of see where the cable comes up and loops over. So if you had the F-150 cable, you're going to have that much longer of a cable, so you have to loop that around, and it's somewhat of a tight 180 that it has to make. So any extra length there is going to be a little bit harder, but I think that'll be perfect. That'll get secured, and we should be good to go there for the shifter. I also have been doing some wiring in here too. I wired up a connector for my center console. This is actually for the center console too, for some of the switches and stuff, but just before it was just kind of some spade connectors, so I put some Deutsch connectors in there just to make it a little more nicer and more professional. I do have the cable or wires for the gear indicator sensor down on the transmission coming up through here. This is also got the wires for the trans temp gauge or sender in here too, coming up through there. I'll just kind of show you on the center console here. Get this off. So you can kind of see I have wiring here that I had wired up, and also for the gear indicator I put a Deutsch connector on there. But so I have the trans temp oil pressure gauge in here. You know, this is the gear indicator, and then I also have, you know, switches and some power outlets and stuff like that on there. So that's why all this wiring is actually in here. And so I spent a little time yesterday trying to just wire that up, make that look nicer. So when it's time to go back together, it's quick and easy. I can show you quick how. You can kind of see I just have the trans temp probe or sensor in the side of the pan there, and then that right here is the sensor for the gear indicator, and I just have them running straight up, and I'll zip tie that up later. So I picked up a bearing and a 2-bolt flange. The bolt was here and here. I just cut it off and trimmed it so it's round. But you can pick this up at just about any kind of farm store or whatever, hardware store probably. But what I'm going to end up doing is being I took that other shaft off of here, and the bearing was out here for support. You know, this will move around in here. So I want to have something here to support that, because most likely I'm going to cut the shaft right here. You know, and depending on how you set up yours, you could do a totally different steering column if you want. But I think I might end up cutting it right where the deep part of the shaft is here. This is basically a 1-inch shaft. I did have to kind of clean this up with just some sandpaper, emery cloth, to get some of the paint or whatever to get this to slide on here. It's mainly just right there and kind of right there, but what I'll end up doing is just tacking that on there, or kind of weld that on. You don't have to go full weld necessarily all the way around, but just in case you ever want to come back off. But, you know, put a few spots of weld on there, and that'll support that. And that'll all be inside the, you know, the dash or before the firewall, and then somewhere about here probably put a, what do you want to call it, a joint, the U-joint from there, and then go through the firewall somehow. So we'll get that tacked, welded up. Today I actually want to see if I can get the firewall mount bearing mounted. You know, we won't necessarily get all the steering figured out just yet. You know, while we're waiting for the suspension to come in and the power rack and pinion. But you can see I already have that bearing installed here for support, because I had taken that pipe out that was up here, and the bearing used to sit, you know, out here somewhere. So got all that off, put a different bearing here for support. I would like to cut, you can see this is got D-shaped right up to about here. I'm probably actually going to cut it right at this point. Right about here is where the firewall sits, and then this is where the old linkage actually bolted up to. This is D-shaped up here too, double D'd. So I actually want to cut this here, and this is a 1-inch diameter shaft basically. So I got 3/4 inch double D. Couple reasons, I guess. One, I was hoping that would fit inside of here, which it looks it's going to be able to. And then also just a smaller shaft, because I'm going to need that clearance for the headers to sneak by the frame and the headers and all that stuff. So it barely just about fits on this end, but this isn't, it's shaped just slightly different than it is down here. I mean, they're both D-shaped, but one side has kind of a flat spot on it versus being rounded. So I want to actually cut it off here and then see if I can actually put the shaft in there inside, and then be able to weld around there, and then that'll stick through the firewall, through the bearing and everything, and then I'll just cut it on the outside to whatever length I need. Hopefully this works, because basically you want to be able to get this straight when I weld this in here. So I haven't quite figured out what we're going to do there yet, or how I'm going to get it perfectly straight. Just have to take my time and figure that out. Otherwise it's going to, you know, wobble a little bit when you're steering. Not that it's going fast or anything, but you don't want that steering linkage to bind while you're trying to steer it, I guess. So all right, so I got the pipe cut off here, right where that round part of it goes to the D shape, double D. Might be a little bit hard to see here, but there's actually a stop in there. So it goes in maybe 1.5 inches or so. And then there's another, it's basically plugged. So about where that bearing is. But it turns out, man, this 3/4 double D slides right in there. Fits perfect. A little bit of play there, which I think will be fine. But we'll get that welded up all the way around there. You know, cut it off somewhere in the middle here. I'll have to measure that. But man, it's perfect. That's almost a perfect fit there, where it's nice and straight. And I'm pretty happy about that, actually. I thought maybe there was going to be more play in there, but that will work out perfect. Yeah, let's get that kind of figured out, what lengths we need, and we can get that measured up. You know, I would recommend just tacking it at first, spinning the steering column over, just to make sure that's, you know, not wobbling on the other end here. But that'll work. So I cut the shaft here at 16.5 inches. You can see it's basically touching the head here, corner of the head. I got it just kind of slid in there right now. I don't have it fully welded. I got a little bit of room down here, because once I cut this hole here, it's actually going to come down a little bit. I'll show you on the inside here, but I think this, where I have this X mark, we're going to be up just a little bit from the center of the hole there, you know, and it should be able to clear coming through here. Can I show you what I was thinking about doing? There you can kind of see where I want to drill. I wanted to, originally I was going to put the bearing somewhat like this, you know, it would have been flipped this way, but that's how I was kind of aiming it for, where that X was on the other side, and it would have lined up okay, but I think that would have been a little bit too steep of an angle here. It would have worked, but you would have had to, you know, modify this bracket probably a fair amount just to get it to angle down. And I do have enough with these seats in here and the steering wheel. This isn't a tilt column, so I always had kind of problems with, you know, the bolsters being higher on these seats and the steering wheel trying to sneak in between here, because it's not a very big truck. So any angle, I guess, going up is going to help me slide in and out for egress. So my flashlight went to hell. All right, got the flashlight working again. But yeah, if you can kind of see where I have the mark there, that's kind of where I want the center of the hole. there's a bolt just to the side of it here that I had previously wanted to use. You know, I was going to bolt it on with one and then just have to put a bolt on the other side here, kind of angle it down or whatever. But I think what I'm going to do is put this straight across like this, so I'm able to keep it up a little bit higher. And I think I'm going to just have to slide this over a little bit and get rid of this bolt here. So I think when I drill the hole here and use a hole saw, I want to just get rid of this bolt hole here, or the threads here, and get that cleaned out. And then I'll just put a nutsert on both sides so it's mounted like that. I plan on putting I got to fill this hole in anyway with a plate, so I got to make that plate, and I'll just come down a little bit further once I drill that hole to cover that up, and then this will be bolted, and that should all be fairly strong in here. Biggest thing you kind of have to watch, wherever you put this, compared to how your steering column is mounted up here. Obviously, if you slide this left or right, up or down, that's going to change the angle way down at the other end. So you kind of want that all lined up as straight as possible. And so it takes a little bit of measuring just to get it just right, but I think this is going to work. If I drill that hole there and just mount it up like that, and we'll have to repaint the firewall, or might be some welding on the other side when we get to that point, but you can kind of see back of the head right there. It just kind of clears through there. So, but I think you just got to drop it down a little bit. And then on this side, we hopefully should still have enough room for the headers back on this side, as long as we kind of keep it right by the frame here. And it's going to angle down a little bit, so that'll give us a little bit more room. But I mean, the headers are going to be tight either way. So there you can see I kind of cut a hole down here where that bearing is going to go through the firewall. I ended up putting up 2 nutserts, or some people call them rivet nuts, in there. And then that other hole was about right here that I cut out. And now I just had to kind of made a pattern. I'll show you that in a second here. It kind of extends down further from what that original factory bracket was that was here. Just to come down, and then that'll all be bolted together, kind of just to reinforce that area. And we kind of should be good with more or less wrap that up. I'll put a little paint on it, but I'll show you the pattern quick. So I traced this out, kind of see it here, this line here, where the factory bracket here looked like. So I just traced that out, extended it down a little bit below that bearing, so that adds some support. So then there I'll have to cut this hole obviously, but we'll have the 2 bolts here that'll go through the firewall and the bearing and everything to sandwich that together, and then you'll have the factory bolts here, the 4 that are remaining. And the 5th one was cut there. So just got to get this cut out, drill those holes out and stuff, and then we should be able to put some paint and kind of put that together. Alright, so there's what the finished plate looks like. Everything lined up right. I'll have to put some paint on it. I did drill 2 extra holes, one there and one here. That's going to be for the pedal assembly. I also have one more to kind of drill up here. You can see my little mark there. We'll get that drilled, put some rivet nuts in there, or nutserts, and should be able to mount the pedal here. So that's coming along nicely. Not quite sure why Ford made this pedal assembly so kind of bulky, but it should fit. It's just that I'm going to try and trim this a little bit. These right where these tabs are, these kind of round tabs where the bolt holes are, they don't need to be so big there. So if you look, you can see a line right here, and it kind of goes up. This one's got kind of the same thing. There's a line. So I'm going to trim all that off, kind of on each side here, and go just around the bolt where the bolt hole is. So I'll show you here right when I get done trimming this off. It'll save me a lot more room. So there we go, pedals all installed. See, you got a 5/16 bolt up on top. I wouldn't have to go that big, I guess, but that's what size hole that was on top there. And then 2/4 on this side. Basically just kind of lined it up so it's, you know, these pads here were pretty level here with this one, with the brake pedal. Maybe I can find a brake pad or a pedal pad here that kind of matches close to this one, so they both look the same. But yeah, I think it turned out okay. We'll get that back pulled off and get this all painted up, and I think for the most part we're kind of done with the firewall on the inside here. Next will basically be just kind of touching up the outside and sealing that up, but we'll have to pull the motor back out again. I decided too that instead of welding this shaft in here, I think I'm just gonna end up putting a bolt right through here. You know, I can always go back and weld this if I want to in the future, but I think being able to take that apart if I want to will be kind of nice to have. So we'll probably drill that through and put like a 3/8 bolt or something like that there and make that tight. One other thing too, as far as the steering, just something to be aware of. I don't know if I'll do it right away. Probably wait for the basically for the brake booster to come in, so I can kind of fully wrap up where the pedals are going to sit and everything. But because I cut off that pipe that extended out through the firewall on here, the only thing holding the weight of all of this would be these 2 bolts here. You know, with the support of the bearing on this rod here, it should be fine and be okay, but I might end up, you know, somehow making a bracket from here to the pedal box or to the firewall or something like that, just for a little extra support, so it's not all the weights hanging out, you know, down here on the steering wheel, because this is aluminum, so I don't know if that would fatigue after a while if it flexed just enough and wiggled. So just something to be aware of. Now one last thing, I guess, before, well, 2 last things. Now that the firewall pass through here for the steering column is kind of wrapped up, a couple things I want to do just before I end this video is I'll probably put a little Dynamat where I cut all the old stuff out and fill that in. I should be good there. I won't show you that just because I think you can figure that out for yourself. Otherwise, I want to actually mount a Dakota digital speedometer box down here. I'll show you. This box here is what I want to try and mount down there. This is an electronic signal to a mechanical driven speedometer. So this would be the mechanical cable. I'll show you the part number here, and I'll put it in the description too, but that's the Dakota digital part number. And then it basically gets its, you can basically get, as long as you have an electronic signal from the transmission or something like that, you can hardwire it if you need to, but otherwise it comes with the OBD2 port connector, and that would just plug right into this. And I should be able to do it, being the harness for the engine comes with the OBD2 port. I'll probably get like a splitter or something so I can just have it fully plugged in all the time under the dash. But that's where we should be able to get our signal from. And then, you know, we'll mount this in kind of somewhere where the clutch pedal would be, up against that side there. The cable here is a little bit long from where I'm mounting this. There's not the most room under here to mount it. You know, I want to have it somewhat accessible because it's got a digital display on it for codes or whatever if you need to, but I thought about mounting it kind of underneath the center console, but then I, you know, would have to move all that if I wanted to see it. You know, back against this wall here, there's not really a whole lot of room under the dash itself. There's not a whole lot of room to mount it. So I think I'm going to mount it here up against this sidewall here. Actually run the cable up out of it, and it's fairly close to where the gauge cluster is going to sit. So I think I had tried it once already, and the cable I'll probably have to somehow loop inside here, one loop, and then run it up to the back of the gauge cluster. I did some research as far as, you know, how I wanted to get all the gauges to work and everything on here. You could go with a full-on new gauge cluster. Nothing really fits in here that you could just buy and bolt in, like a digital, you know, display or something like that. You could do individual gauges, but there again, there's not a whole lot of room in here. So I thought, well, if I can keep the original gauges, I want to. And I ended up finding that for the most part, I'll have to run a new coolant temp sensor. That's why I made one on the engine. I can kind of show you that here. That'd be here. I took this elbow here on top and actually welded in a bung, and that's where that coolant temp sensor is. And then I made it so down by the oil filter assembly that I ended up putting another oil pressure gauge sensor there, and that should run the factory gauges in here. And then the only other thing would be the speedometer, how we would make that, because the 6R80 doesn't have a mechanical output for this speedometer. Everything's electronic, so it's just a matter of, you know, figuring out how to get that to work. So you could do a GPS type gauge or something like that. I think Dakota Digital makes an actual, instead of that mechanical box, it would be a GPS, and then it would just be straight to electronic gauge or something. I didn't want that, I guess, because there is a little bit of a delay until you start moving with those. So I kind of wanted to keep it mechanical. So that's why I ended up going that route, but we'll get that thing mounted in there, and then you know, I don't think I'm going to fully hook it up yet, but we'll worry about wiring it up later. But we'll at least get it mounted in there, and then we'll probably end the video here. So, all right, there we go. Dynamat's installed. I got that Dakota Digital box mounted right here. I just got the wires kind of looped up in here for now, but that's mounted. Cables run. It's actually, as you can see, it goes up, kind of behind the dash brace, and then this is the cable here. It kind of loops back down around and goes back up, and then that comes out right here where the back of the gauge cluster is. Also went and installed the pedal here, which I think I showed already, but put that back on, so that's good to go. I believe everything's kind of shaping up real nice in here. Yeah. So there we go, a few more things checked off the list. Hopefully our suspension will be coming in pretty soon. And appreciate you guys sticking around, kind of watching this stuff. Hopefully you like it. Until then, guys, we'll see you next time. Thanks.